In the dim light of a medieval cottage, a baby's soft cooing would echo through the room. A tired mother, worn from endless chores and lack of sleep, would hand the infant a simple rattle to soothe the cries. It was a small object, unassuming, maybe shaped like a bell or a little orb with holes for sound. It jingled softly as the baby shook it with delight. But lurking beneath its innocent clatter was a danger no one in that household could have guessed. Cold, heavy, poisonous lead, shaped into a child's toy. In medieval Europe, the concept of childhood was drastically different from what we know today. Children were expected to grow up fast. Many didn't survive beyond their first few years. And few toys were made with their long-term well-being in mind. But toys did exist, even for the youngest members of society. Wealthy families often gifted rattles to newborns. These were not always humble wooden trinkets. The more privileged the family, the more ornate the toy. Crafted by metalworkers and artisans, some rattles were made of silver, bronze, or pewter, and among these, many were made of lead or lead alloys materials that were soft, easy to mold, and widely available. Lead was everywhere in the medieval world. People used it to make water pipes, cooking pots, cosmetics, and even wine preservatives. No one realized the havoc it could wreak on the human body. For adults, the exposure was bad enough, leading to fatigue, headaches, stomach pains, and eventually madness or death. For infants, those tiny developing bodies, it was catastrophic. Imagine a teething baby gumming away at a lead rattle, the metal flaking ever so slightly into their mouth. No one could see it, but each bite carried a small dose of neurotoxin. To the medieval mind, a rattle wasn't just a toy. It served a greater symbolic and even spiritual function. People believed that the soft jingling noise could ward off evil spirits. A crying baby, they thought, was vulnerable to supernatural forces. So the rattle was not just a tool for amusement, it was a talisman. The metal bells or beads inside were designed not only to calm but to protect. Ironically, the very material meant to guard against unseen forces was silently poisoning the child. There is a certain tragedy in this medieval irony. The more ornate and luxurious the rattle, the more likely it was to be deadly. Wealthy families who wanted to bestow love and protection, often, unknowingly gave their babies a death sentence wrapped in silver and lead. There are museum artifacts today, delicate baby rattles on display behind glass, that shined with history and craftsmanship. Some look beautiful even now, with intricate engravings or looped handles for tiny fingers, and yet we know with our modern eyes that those very toys were ticking time bombs. Lead poisoning in babies' presence in cruel, subtle ways. Slower development, irritability, seizures, cognitive decline. But in medieval times, no one had the tools to connect these symptoms. A baby who failed to thrive was perhaps thought to be weak in constitution or cursed. A child who couldn't walk or talk at the expected age was just slow. There was no understanding of toxins or the lasting damage of exposure. Even doctors of the time, who leaned heavily on astrology and the theory of humors, would never have suspected the toy in the child's hand. Yet the danger didn't end with rattles. Other playthings were also tainted with materials we now know to be hazardous. Painted wooden toys might have been coated with dyes that contained mercury or arsenic. But lead was the most insidious because of its versatility. It was so easy to work with that artisans used it liberally. Coins, religious figurines, household charmsel could be made with lead or alloys like pewter, which often had high lead content. For babies, that meant that even when not chewing on the rattle, they were inhaling or touching lead through their environment. In less privileged households, toys were made of wood, cloth, or even bone. Poorer families carved whistles or fashioned dolls from scraps. These materials, while rough and far less elegant, may have ironically spared many children from the slow suffering caused by lead. In this strange twist of fate, being too poor to afford luxury could mean a longer, healthier life. The gap between rich and poor showed itself not just in possessions, but in unintended consequences. The world of medieval parenting was filled with love, fear, and superstition. Parents did what they could with the knowledge they had. They used herbal remedies when children were sick, hung charms above cradles, and told stories to lull children to sleep. But without understanding bacteria, toxins, or chemical compounds, they were often flying blind. And in this dark sea of ignorance, Even the most tender gesture, handing a baby a shiny new rattle, could lead to tragedy. It wasn't until centuries later that the toxic nature of lead was fully understood. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, industrial workers exposed to lead began showing clear signs of poisoning, and scientists finally began to connect the dots. Lead paint was banned in toys in many countries in the mid-1900s. But the legacy of lead poisoning runs deep, and even today, children around the world are still at risk in places where the regulations are lax or the materials still linger. The medieval rattle stands as a haunting relic. It embodies the love of a parent, the skill of a craftsman, and the invisible thread of danger that wove its way through innocent play. These toys, often engraved with religious icons or blessed by priests, carried the hopes of a family. And yet the true curse was not spiritual at all. It was material, invisible, and deadly. Looking back, it's easy to feel a sense of superiority. We know better now. Our toys go through safety testing. We demand BPA-free plastics, non-toxic paints, and choking hazard warnings.
Ow.
But even today, there are echoes of the past in our modern anxieties. We still fret over screen time, food additives, microplastics, and environmental toxins. Our generation has simply replaced one set of dangers with another, and our attempts to protect the young are still tangled in uncertainty. Still, one cannot help but imagine the scene. A medieval mother pressing a rattle into the chubby hands of her child, smiling as the bells jingle softly. The baby laughs, delighted. The moment is pure and joyful. And somewhere nearby, the family prays that this child survives the winter, that the pax doesn't return, that the spirits are kept at bay. They have no idea that the real danger lies not outside, but in the very object they trust to protect and entertain. Those ancient rattles now sit in museums, polished and silent. The clatter has long since stopped, the danger long since passed. But they tell a powerful story. A story of human tenderness wrapped in tragedy, of love in the shape of poison, of the long journey we have taken from innocence to awareness, from superstition to science, and of the babies who giggled at death without ever knowing it. Thanks for joining us on this chilling journey into the forgotten world of medieval toys. It's hard to believe that something as innocent as a baby's rattle once held such silent danger, often with love and care, often from shining metals that parents believed brought protection and peace. These rattles unknowingly carried a hidden threat. While they jingled softly in tiny hands, they were quietly harming the very children they were meant to comfort. History has a strange way of teaching us. Sometimes the greatest risks come not from what we fear, but from what we don't yet understand. These deadly rattles remind us that progress often comes at a painful cost, and that even our best intentions can go astray when knowledge is missing. If you found this glimpse into the past as haunting and fascinating as we did, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. There's more history waiting to be uncovered, stories filled with wonder, shock, and the raw humanity that connects us across the centuries. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, the past is always closer than it seems.